Good morning, friends. Chapter 7, The Molecule. Andy Coupe very nearly spent his career watching paint dry. The son of a machinist and school cafeteria worker, Coupe hailed from Halifax in northern England. He finished his undergraduate work in chemistry at Oxford University in 1991. He was given a choice of where to continue his studies. At Cardiff University was a professor whose specialty was the chemistry of paint. Industry at the time was aiming to find a new paint that dried at a certain temperature. At the University of Bristol was John Lewis, who studied the chemistry of drugs and addiction. In the 1960s, Lewis had discovered buprenorphine, an opiate that he later helped develop into a treatment for heroin addicts. Coupe didn't remember giving the choice much thought. Drugs sounded more interesting than paint was all. So off to Bristol and John Lewis he went. It was there in 1991, in a lab at Bristol, that Andy Coupe encountered the morphine molecule, the essential element in all opiates. In time, Andy Coupe got hooked on the morphine molecule, figuratively of course, for he only once took a drug that contained it, and that following surgery. I looked up Andy Coupe because I wanted to understand the molecule behind the story that consumed me. Like no other particle on Earth, the morphine molecule seemed to possess heaven and hell. It allowed for modern surgery, saving and improving too many lives to count. It stunted and ended too many lives to count with addiction and overdose. Discussing it, you could invoke some of humankind's greatest cultural creations and deepest questions. Faust, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, discussions on the fundamental nature of man and human behavior, of free will and slavery, of God and evolution. Studying the molecule, you naturally wandered into questions like, can mankind achieve happiness without pain? Would that happiness even be worth it? Can we have it all? I might have loved paint, Coupe told me, but the conversation over evolution, heaven and hell, psychology, none of that matters when you're studying paint. In heroin addicts, I had seen the debasement that comes from the loss of free will and enslavement to what amounts to an idea, permanent pleasure, numbness, and the avoidance of pain. But man's decay has always begun as soon as he has it all, and is free of friction, pain, and the deprivation that temper his behavior. In fact, the United States achieved something like this state of affairs in the period this book is about, the last decade of the 20th century and the first decade of the 21st. When I returned home from Mexico during those years, I noticed a scary obesity emerging. It wasn't just the people. Everything seemed obese and excessive. Massive Hummers and SUVs were cars on steroids. In some of the Southern California suburbs near where I grew up, on plots laid out with 3-bedroom houses in the 1950s, 7,000-square-foot mansions barely squeezed between the lot lines, leaving no place for yards in which to enjoy the California sun. In Northern California's Humboldt and Mendocino counties, 1960s hippies became the last great American pioneers by escaping their parents' artificial world. They lived in teepees without electricity and funded the venture by growing pot. Now their children and grandchildren, like mad scientists, were using chemicals and 1,000-watt bulbs in railroad cars buried to avoid detection, to forge hyperpotent strains of pot. Their weed rippled like the muscles of bodybuilders, and growing this stuff helped destroy the natural world that their parents once sought. Excess contaminated the best of America. Caltech churned out brilliant students, yet too many of them now went not to science, but to Wall Street to create financial gimmicks that paid off handsomely and produced nothing. Exorbitant salaries, meanwhile, were paid to Wall Street and corporate executives, no matter how poorly they did. Banks packaged rolls of bad mortgages, and we believed Stanford and Poor's when they called them AAA. Well-off parents no longer asked their children to work when they became teenagers. In Mexico, I gained new appreciation of what America means to a poor person limited by his own humble origins. I took great pride that America had turned more poor Mexicans into members of the middle class than had Mexico. Then I would return home and see too many of the country turning on this legacy in pursuit of comfort, living on credit, attempting to achieve happiness through more stuff. And I saw no coincidence that this was also when great new numbers of these same kids, most of them well off and white, began consuming huge quantities of the morphine molecule, doping up and tuning out. I looked up Andy Coupe, who chairs the Department of Pharmaceutical Sciences at the University of Maryland in Baltimore. What gave the morphine molecule its immense power, he said, was that it evolved somehow to fit key-in lock into the receptors that all mammals, especially humans, have in their brains and spines, the so-called mu-opioid receptors, designed to create pleasure sensations when they receive endorphins the body naturally produces, were especially welcoming to the morphine molecule. The receptor combines with endorphins to give us those glowing feelings at, say, the sight of an infant or the feel of a furry puppy. The morphine molecule overwhelms the receptor, creating a far more intense euphoria than anything we come by internally. It also produces drowsiness, constipation, and an end to physical pain. Aspirin had a limit to the amount of pain it could calm, but the more morphine you took, Coop said, the more pain was dulled. For this reason, no plant has been more studied for its medicinal properties than the opium poppy. As the mature poppy's petals fall away, a golf ball-sized bulb emerges atop the stem. The bulb houses a goo that contains opium. From opium, humans have derived laudanum, codeine, thebaine, hydrocodone, oxymorphone, and heroin, as well as almost 200 other drugs, all containing the morphine molecule or variations of it. Atorphine, derived from thebaine, is used in dart guns to tranquilize rhinoceroses and elephants. Tobacco, coca leaves, and other plants had evolved to be pleasurable and addictive to humans, Coop said, but the morphine molecule surpassed them in euphoric intensity. Then it exacted a mighty vengeance when a human dared to stop using it. In withdrawal from the drug, an addict left narcotized numbness and returned to life and to feeling. Numbed addicts were notoriously impotent. In withdrawal, they had frequent orgasms as they began to feel again. Humans with the temerity to attempt to withdraw from the morphine molecule were tormented first with excruciating pain that lasted for days. If an addict was always constipated and nodding off, his withdrawals brought ferocious diarrhea and a week of sleeplessness. The morphine molecule resembled a spoiled lover throwing a tantrum as it left. Junkies I talked to, in fact, said that they had an utmost constipated tingling when trying to urinate during the end of withdrawal, as if the last of the molecule, now holed up in the kidney, was fighting like hell to keep from being expelled. Like a lover, no other molecule in nature provided such merciful pain relief, then hooked humans so completely and punished them so mercilessly for wanting their freedom from it. Certain parasites in nature exert the kind of control that makes a host act contrary to its own interests. Like protozoan, Toxoplasma gondii reproduces inside the belly of a cat and is then excreted by the feline. One way it begins the cycle again is to infect a rat passing near the excrement. Toxoplasma gondii reprograms the infected rat to love cat urine, which to healthy rats is a predator warning. An infected rat wallows in cat urine, offering itself up as an easy meal to a nearby cat. This way, the parasite again enters the cat's stomach, reproduces, and it is expelled in the cat's excrement, and the cycle continues. That's sick. The morphine molecule exerts an analogous brainwashing on humans, pushing them to act contrary to their self-interest in pursuit of the molecule. Addicts betray loved ones, steal, live under freeways in harsh weather, and run similarly horrific risks to use the molecule. It became the poster molecule for an age of excess. No amount of it was ever enough. The molecule created ever higher tolerance. Plus, it had a way of railing on when the body gathered the courage to throw it out. This wasn't only during withdrawals. Most drugs are easily reduced to water-soluble glucose in the human body, which then expels them. Alone in nature, the morphine molecule rebelled. It resisted being turned into glucose, and it stayed in the body. We still can't explain why this happens. It just doesn't follow the rules. Every other drug in the world, thousands of them, follow this rule. Morphine doesn't, Coop said. It really is almost like someone designed it that way, diabolically so. Have a good day, friends.